They thought firing me was the end of my story. They didn't know they just handed me the detonator to the most valuable vault their empire owned. In a world where megacorporations treat people like numbers on a spreadsheet, one woman who spent years crafting the legal shields protecting their intellectual property turned their own workforce optimization strategy into a death sentence. And when the countdown ended, their billion-dollar empire crumbled with nothing more than a single signature. My name is Alexis Monroe, and for 16 years, I was the invisible shield protecting Berlane Technologies' most valuable assets. Until the morning they decided I was expendable. The email arrived at 8:47 a.m. on a Tuesday that started like any other. Please report to conference room 52A at 9 a.m. for an urgent meeting with VP Damian Rourke. No subject line, no context. Just those clinical words that made my stomach drop before my brain could process why. I'd never met Damian Rourke in person. He'd been brought in 6 months ago as Vice President of Resource Optimization, corporate speak for the executioner who decides which head's role to make quarterly reports look prettier. Harvard MBA, Goldman Sachs pedigree, and the emotional range of a spreadsheet. His reputation preceded him like the smell of blood before a shark. Conference room 52A was one of those glass-walled fishbowls where careers went to die. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Boston. Italian leather chairs that cost more than most people's monthly salary. And a mahogany table polished to mirror perfection. The kind of room designed to make you feel small before anyone even spoke. Damian was already there when I arrived, flanked by 2 HR representatives whose names I'd never bothered to learn. He didn't stand when I entered, didn't offer his hand, just gestured to the chair across from him with the casual indifference of someone ordering coffee. "Ms. Monroe," he began, not even glancing up from his tablet. "As you're aware, Berlane Technologies is undergoing strategic restructuring to position ourselves for optimal market competitiveness." I sat perfectly still, my hands folded in my lap. 16 years of corporate warfare had taught me that silence was often the sharpest weapon in rooms like this. After careful evaluation of departmental redundancies and cost-benefit analyses, we've identified several positions that no longer align with our forward-thinking trajectory. He finally looked up, his gray eyes as warm as February sleet. "Your position is being eliminated, effective immediately." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. 16 years. 16 years of 70-hour weeks. Missed birthdays, canceled vacations. 16 years of building the legal fortress that protected every patent, every trade secret, every piece of intellectual property that made Berlane worth its current $3.2 billion valuation. "I see," I said, my voice steady as granite. "And my pension?" Damian's lips twitched into what might have been a smile on someone capable of actual human emotion. "Given the current restructuring parameters, legacy benefit packages are being recalibrated. Your pension has been classified as an acceptable loss in our optimization model." Acceptable loss. He said it like he was discussing office supplies, not 20 years of promised retirement security. "Acceptable loss," I repeated, tasting the words like wine I was about to spit out. "That's an interesting choice of phrase, Mr. Rourke." "It's just business, Ms. Monroe, nothing personal." He slid a manila folder across the table. "Your severance package includes 2 weeks' pay and continued health coverage through the end of the month. Security will escort you to clear your office. You have 30 minutes. I stood slowly, picking up the folder without opening it. The HR representatives shifted uncomfortably, probably expecting tears, anger, maybe begging. They'd seen this show before, after all. But I just smiled, a small, private smile that made Damian's eyebrow twitch slightly. "Thank you for the clarity. Mr. Rourke," I said, heading for the door. "I do appreciate when people tell me exactly where I stand." The walk to my office felt like a funeral procession in reverse. Colleagues averted their eyes, some out of sympathy, others out of fear that unemployment might be contagious. The security guard, Tony, who I'd shared coffee with every morning for 5 years, couldn't meet my gaze as he watched me pack 16 years into a cardboard box. I took only 3 things: a photo of my late mother, the fountain pen she'd given me when I passed the bar exam, and a single manila folder from my locked desk drawer. A folder I'd kept for 14 years, waiting for a moment I'd hoped would never come. As the elevator descended from the 52nd floor, I thought about the meeting I'd accidentally walked into back in 2006, when Berlane was hemorrhaging money and desperate enough to listen to a 22-year-old junior associate's wild idea about protecting their patents. I thought about the clause I'd insisted on adding, buried deep in subsection 47B of the restructuring agreement, the clause everyone had forgotten about. The elevator doors opened to the lobby's marble opulence, and I walked out into the Boston morning carrying my cardboard box of memories. Behind me, Berlane Technologies' logo gleamed in polished steel, proud and permanent. They thought they'd fired me. They had no idea they'd just started a timer on their own destruction. And when it went off, acceptable loss would take on a whole new meaning. The folder in my box contained a ghost story, one that began 14 years ago when I was nothing but an overeager law school graduate who'd stumbled into the wrong conference room at the wrong time. Or perhaps, looking back now, exactly the right time. It was November 2006. Berlane Technologies was dying. Not the slow, dignified death of obsolescence, but the violent hemorrhaging of a company that had bet everything on the wrong technology at the wrong moment. Stock price had dropped 87% in 6 months. 3 rounds of layoffs had gutted entire departments. The vultures from private equity firms circled daily, waiting to pick apart the corpse. I'd been with the company for 4 months, a junior associate so low on the totem pole that I didn't even have a proper office, just a converted supply closet with a desk wedged between boxes of printer paper. That Tuesday afternoon, I'd been rushing to conference room 12B for a routine contract review when I pushed open the wrong door. Conference room 12A was full of people I'd only seen in company newsletters. CEO Marcus Berlane himself, his face gaunt from months of crisis management, the entire board of directors, external consultants from McKinsey with their identical suits and predatory smiles. And there, spread across the table like organs on an operating table, were documents I would later realize were Berlane's only hope for survival. 9 patents that nobody understands, Marcus was saying, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. AI-driven diagnostic algorithms that are so far ahead of the market, we can't even find buyers who comprehend what they do. I should have apologized and left immediately. Instead, I froze in the doorway, my brain processing what I was seeing. 9 patent certificates. Core technology that would later revolutionize predictive medicine. Assets that everyone in that room saw as worthless weight dragging down a sinking ship. "Who the hell are you?" barked someone, probably the CFO, though I couldn't be sure. "Alexis Monroe, legal department," I heard myself say. "Junior associate, I apologize for the interruption." Marcus Berlane looked at me with the desperate eyes of a drowning man who'd grab on to anything floating by. "Legal department, you understand patent law?" "Yes, sir. Specialized in intellectual property at Harvard Law." "Then maybe you can explain why we're sitting on 9 patents that cost us $400 million to develop and can't generate a dime of revenue." Every suit in that room turned to stare at me, 22 years old, 4 months out of law school, standing in a doorway I should never have opened. But something about those patents called to me. I saw what they couldn't see, not worthless paper, but sleeping giants waiting for the world to catch up. "Because you're trying to sell them," I said, stepping into the room uninvited. "You should be building a fortress around them instead." The McKinsey consultants laughed, actually laughed. But Marcus held up his hand for silence. "Explain." "These patents aren't products, they're infrastructure. In 10 years, maybe less. Every medical AI system in the world will need to license your technology or build inferior workarounds, but only if you survive long enough to see that future." I moved to the table, my hand steady despite my racing heart. "You need a poison pill, something that ensures these patents stay with the people who keep this company alive through the crisis." "What kind of poison pill?" Marcus asked. A reversion clause. If the company fails to honor its full pension obligations to employees who stay through the restructuring, ownership of these specific patents reverts to those employees collectively. It incentivizes loyalty, protects long-term workers, and most importantly, I paused, meeting his eyes. It makes these patents untouchable by hostile takeover. No vulture fund will risk triggering a clause that could strip them of the core assets. The room erupted in arguments. The McKinsey consultants called it insane. The CFO said it was financial suicide. But Marcus Burlane, desperate and out of options, saw it differently. Draft it, he told me. Tonight. I worked for 36 straight hours, fueled by coffee and the intoxicating terror of holding a company's future in my inexperienced hands. The clause I wrote was buried in subsection 47B of the restructuring agreement, wrapped in so much legal jargon that even experienced lawyers would skim past it. It bound those 9 specific patents, identified only by their filing numbers, to the pension obligations of any employee who remained with the company through the 2006-2008 crisis period. The board signed it without reading the fine print. They were too focused on survival to worry about hypothetical scenarios where they deliberately screw over their own people. After all, what kind of company would be stupid enough to trigger its own self-destruct mechanism? Sitting in my apartment 14 years later, I spread out the documents from that manila folder. The original restructuring agreement with my signature as witness. The list of patent numbers, now worth approximately $2.8 billion in licensing fees alone. The employee roster from the crisis period, showing I'd been there since August 2006. And finally, the email from Damian Rourke, sent to all department heads last week, describing pension eliminations as acceptable losses in service of shareholder value. He'd probably never even heard of subsection 47B. None of them had. It had been sleeping for 14 years, waiting for someone to be foolish enough to wake it up. I picked up my phone and dialed Michael Avery, the best patent attorney in Boston who didn't work for Burlane. Michael, it's Alexis Monroe. Remember that hypothetical situation we discussed last week? It just became very real. Michael Avery's office occupied the entire 44th floor of a building that seemed to pierce Boston's skyline like an accusation. Everything about it screamed success, from the Persian rugs that cost more than most people's cars to the original Rothko hanging behind his desk. Michael himself looked like he'd been carved from the same expensive marble as his desk ornaments, silver-haired, sharp-featured, with eyes that had seen every dirty trick corporate America could devise. "Show me everything," he said, clearing his massive desk with one sweep of his arm. I laid out the documents like tarot cards predicting Burlane's future. The original 2006 restructuring agreement, the patent filing numbers, my employment records, the termination letter classifying my pension as an acceptable loss. Michael read in silence for 20 minutes, occasionally making notes on a yellow legal pad. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and whistled low. "Jesus Christ, Alexis, you built them a doomsday device, and they just pushed the button. Can it hold up in court?" "Hold up?" Michael laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "This is ironclad. You tied the patent ownership directly to the pension obligation, not to employment status. The moment they classified your pension as an acceptable loss while maintaining company profitability, they triggered the reversion clause. Those 9 patents technically belong to you as of," he checked his watch, 9:47 this morning. My hands were steady, but my heart was hammering. "What's our next move?" "First, we verify everything, every document, every signature, every chain of custody." Michael was already pulling up databases on his computer. "Then we file a quiet notice of ownership transfer with the USPTO. Nothing flashy, nothing that triggers alarms. We want this to be bulletproof before they even know we're coming." For the next 6 hours, we worked with the methodical precision of surgeons. Michael had 2 associates pull every public filing related to the patents. We discovered things that made my blood run cold with satisfaction. Not only had Burlane built their entire future technology platform on those 9 patents, But they'd also integrated them so deeply into their infrastructure that extracting them would be like trying to remove a skeleton from a living body. Holy shit, one of the associates breathed, looking at her screen. They're in negotiations with Helvix Biocorp. Preliminary merger agreement for $5.8 billion. Michael and I exchanged glances. Helvix was the white whale of biotech acquisitions, and Berlane had been courting them for 2 years. When? I asked. Announcement scheduled for next Monday. The patents are listed as primary assets in the valuation model. Without them, the deal is worth maybe $500 million. Michael stood up, pacing to his window. Alexis, we need to discuss strategy. We could file immediately, tank the deal, and force a settlement. Or we wait, I finished. Let them announce. Let the stock price soar. Let them pop champagne and celebrate their genius. And then we file. That's vindictive. They called my pension an acceptable loss, Michael. 20 years of loyalty dismissed in a PowerPoint slide. I want them to understand what real loss feels like. Michael studied me for a long moment. There's something else. The clause you wrote, it applies to any employee from the crisis period whose pension was eliminated. How many others? I'd already done the math. 14 that I know of. All let go in the last 3 months as part of Rourke's optimization. All classified as acceptable losses. We could contact them, make this a collective action. Not yet. First, we establish my claim, clean, simple, undeniable, then we bring in the others. I stood, gathering the documents. How long do you need to make this airtight? Give me 72 hours. I'll have 3 independent patent attorneys verify the clause interpretation. We'll run chain of title searches on all 9 patents. Create a paper trail so perfect that their own lawyers will weep. He paused at his door. Alexis, you realize what you're about to do? You're going to destroy them. I thought about Tony the security guard, who couldn't meet my eyes. About the colleagues who'd looked away in the halls. About 16 years of missed dinners and forgotten birthdays, all dismissed as an acceptable loss. No, Michael. They destroyed themselves. I'm just collecting what they owe me. That night, I sat in my apartment with a glass of wine, watching the Boston skyline glitter. Somewhere in that maze of lights, Damien Rourke was probably reviewing his optimization metrics, congratulating himself on cutting dead weight. Marcus Berlane, long since retired with his golden parachute, was living on his estate in Vermont, blissfully unaware that a document he'd signed in desperation 14 years ago was about to return. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. USPTO filings confirmed. All 9 patents still list subsection 47B as active encumbrance. They never removed it because they never knew it existed. I raised my glass to the city lights. To acceptable losses, I whispered, and unacceptable consequences. The timer was ticking now. In 72 hours, we'd have everything we needed. And then Berlane Technologies would learn what it really meant to lose something essential to their survival. They'd thought they were predators, eliminating the weak from the herd. They'd forgotten that sometimes the prey bites back, and sometimes it aims for the throat. Monday arrived wrapped in perfect irony. The morning news streams blazed with Berlane's triumph. Breaking: Berlane Technologies announces historic $5.8 billion merger with Helvix Biocorp. Stock price surged 47% in pre-market trading. CNBC analysts called it the deal of the decade. The Financial Times ran a fawning profile of Damien Rourke, the optimizer who saved Berlane. I watched from my kitchen, sipping coffee from the same mug I'd used for 16 years of early mornings at Berlane. Michael had called at 6 a.m. Everything was ready. The documents were perfect. The legal interpretation had been verified by 3 independent experts. The USPTO filing was prepared. All we needed was my signature to light the fuse. Let them have their moment, I told him. Let's wait until the markets close. Those 8 hours were exquisite torture. I monitored everything: stock prices, social media, internal communications from former colleagues who didn't know I still had access to certain shared drives. At 11 a.m., Berlane held a company-wide celebration in their main auditorium. Champagne flowed. Rourke gave a speech about revolutionary optimization creating unprecedented value. Marcus Berlane himself called in from Vermont to congratulate everyone on securing the company's future. At 2 p.m., the merger details were released to the SEC. Page 47 of the filing listed the 9 AI diagnostic patents as cornerstone intellectual property assets representing approximately 72% of the combined entity's valuation basis. Without those patents, both companies admitted in the fine print, the merger would not be financially viable. Perfect. At 4:01 p.m., 1 minute after markets closed, Michael filed our notice with the USPTO. At 4:02 p.m., we sent formal notification to Berlane's legal department, Helvix's general counsel, and the SEC. At 4:03 p.m., Michael's assistant hand-delivered copies to 3 major financial journalists who'd been prepped to expect something explosive. At 4:07 p.m., my phone exploded. The first call was from Berlane's chief legal officer, Patricia Morse. I'd worked with her for 10 years. She was screaming before I even said hello. "What the fuck have you done, Alexis?" "I'm exercising my legal rights under subsection 47B of the 2006 restructuring agreement. You have a copy. Page 341, if you need to refresh your memory. This is extortion. We'll bury you in litigation for the next 20 years. It's a contract. Patricia. One that Berlane signed willingly. And before you threaten litigation, you might want to read the arbitration clause. Any disputes go to binding arbitration under Massachusetts contract law. Michael Avery has already filed for expedited hearing. We'll have a ruling within 10 days. The line went dead. The second call came from Damian Rourke himself. His voice had lost all its Harvard Business School polish. "Name your price." "I don't have a price, Mr. Rourke." "Bullshit. Everyone has a price. 5 million. 10? We can make you very wealthy." "Ms. Monroe." "I was wealthy, Mr. Rourke. I had a pension that would have sustained me for 30 years of retirement. You called it an acceptable loss." 20 million. "No. 50 million. Still, no." There was a long pause. I could hear rapid breathing, whispered consultations in the background. "What do you want?" "I want you to understand something, Mr. Rourke. When you optimize human beings out of existence, when you reduce decades of loyalty to a line item on a spreadsheet, there are consequences. I want my pension fully restored, with interest. I want the same for every employee from the crisis period whose pension you eliminated. Full restoration, backdated, with penalty interest. That's close to $100 million. Actually, it's $127 million. I've done the math. That's roughly 2% of what you stand to lose if this merger falls through. Seems like an optimal solution, doesn't it? You're destroying the company out of spite." "No, Mr. Rourke, I'm using the exact same cost-benefit analysis you're so fond of. You made a calculation that my pension was an acceptable loss. I'm simply showing you that your calculation was incorrect. The real loss, the unacceptable one, is about to be yours." By 5 p.m., the story had hit Bloomberg. Questions arise over Berlane patent ownership. By 6 p.m., it was everywhere. Helvix's stock dropped 12% in after-hours trading. Berlane dropped 31%. Michael called at 7 p.m. "Their lawyers just contacted me. They want an emergency meeting. Tonight? Tell them tomorrow. 9 a.m. And Michael? Tell them to bring their checkbooks and their apologies. In that order." That night, I didn't sleep. Not from anxiety, but from the sheer intoxication of watching a plan 14 years in the making finally unfold. Every news alert, every panicked email leaked by former colleagues, every percentage point of stock decline was vindication. They'd thought I was disposable, a rounding error in their optimization equation. They'd forgotten that even the smallest variable, properly positioned, could bring down the entire formula. Tomorrow, they would come to negotiate. They would beg. They would offer anything to make this go away before the markets opened, and I would sit across from them, just as I had sat across from Rourke in that sterile conference room. And I would teach them the true meaning of acceptable loss. The hunter had become the hunted. And the trap was already snapping shut. By Tuesday morning, Berlane Technologies was in full meltdown. Pre-market trading had been halted twice due to volatility. The Wall Street Journal ran a front-page story. Forgotten clause threatens largest biotech merger of the decade. Someone had leaked internal emails showing Rourke dismissing concerns about the pension cuts just weeks ago, calling worried board members weak-minded pessimists who don't understand value creation. The emergency meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. at Michael's office. They arrived at 8:30, a full battalion of corporate soldiers. Patricia Morse led the charge, followed by Rourke. 3 senior partners from Sullivan and Cromwell, 2 board members, and surprisingly, Marcus Berlane himself, who'd flown in from Vermont overnight. Marcus looked older than I remembered, his face gaunt with stress. When he saw me, something flickered in his eyes. Regret? Recognition? He'd been the one to approve my clause 14 years ago, after all. Alexis, he said quietly, I remember you. That conference room. You saved us back then. Yeah, and you let them destroy me last week, I replied evenly. Shall we begin? Michael had arranged the conference room like a courtroom, with our documentation displayed on screens around the walls, the USPTO filing, the original agreement, the termination letters, the pension elimination memos, a comprehensive trap built from their own paperwork. Patricia Morse spoke first, her voice tight with barely controlled rage. This is corporate terrorism. You're deliberately destroying shareholder value to settle a personal vendetta. I'm exercising contractual rights that Berlane agreed to, I responded. Rights that were specifically designed to protect employees who stayed loyal during the company's darkest hour. You triggered those rights? This is consequence, not vendetta. One of the Sullivan and Cromwell partners, a man who looked like he'd been carved from old money and older principles, cleared his throat. Ms. Monroe, we've reviewed the clause. While we dispute its interpretation, 3 independent patent attorneys don't, Michael interrupted, sliding reports across the table. Would you like to see their analyses, or should we skip to the part where you realize you have no legal ground to stand on? Rourke's fist slammed the table. Enough. Name your fucking price. We have a merger to save. I stood, walking to the window. The city spread below us, indifferent to the corporate drama playing out in this tower. Yesterday, I told you my terms. Full pension restoration for all affected employees from the crisis period, but that was yesterday. Before you tried to threaten me with 20 years of litigation. Before your stock price dropped 31%. Before Helvig started making noises about backing out. So what do you want now? Marcus asked quietly. I turned to face them. Everything I asked for yesterday, plus 3 additions. First, a public apology. Full-page ads in the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, and Boston Globe. The headline will read, Berlane Technologies apologizes for calling loyal employees acceptable losses. Second, Damian Rourke's resignation, effective immediately. Rourke shot to his feet. You can't be. Sit down, Damian, Marcus said coldly. What's the third condition? An oversight position. Every employee from the crisis period whose pension was eliminated gets permanent veto power over any future transaction involving those 9 patents. Sell them. License them. Merge them. We have to approve. The room erupted. The lawyers shouted about precedent and fiduciary duty. Patricia threatened criminal charges. Rourke called me various names that would have been amusing if they weren't so unimaginative. But Marcus Berlane just stared at me with those tired eyes. He understood what I was really doing. This wasn't just about money or revenge. It was about power. Permanent, irrevocable power over the very heart of Berlane's value. We need to caucus, Patricia said. They left us alone for 40 minutes. Michael and I sat in comfortable silence, watching the news feeds on his laptop. Helvix had released a statement expressing concern about the patent situation. Their stock was down another 8%. Berlane had dropped so far that trading was suspended entirely. When they returned, Marcus spoke for the group. "We'll agree to the pension restoration and the public apology. Rourke will resign. But the veto power is impossible. It would make the company uninvestable." "Then we have no deal," I said, starting to pack up my documents. "Wait," Patricia grabbed my arm. "Alexis, please. You'll destroy thousands of jobs. People who had nothing to do with your termination. The way you destroyed the retirements of people who had everything to do with saving this company?" I shook her off. "You had a choice. You chose to optimize. Now I'm optimizing too." My phone buzzed. A text from Michael's assistant. Bloomberg. "Helvix considering pulling out of merger." I showed it to the room. "TikTok, ladies and gentlemen. Every minute you waste costs you hundreds of millions in market cap." Marcus Berlane stood slowly. "Give us the veto power for 5 years. Not permanent. 5 years. Permanent, or no deal. 10 years. Permanent." He looked at his team, then at Rourke, who had gone pale as paper. "You realize you're asking us to hand over control of our most valuable assets to people we terminated?" "I'm not asking. Mr. Berlane, I'm telling you the price of your survival. You have," I checked my watch, 90 minutes before markets open, decide." The room fell silent. Somewhere in that silence, I could hear the sound of an empire crumbling, one optimal decision at a time. While they deliberated, Michael and I made our own moves. He'd already compiled a list of the 14 other employees from the crisis period whose pensions had been eliminated. We'd kept this card close to our chest, but now it was time to play it. "I need to make some calls," I told Michael, stepping into his private office. The first was to Dr. James Worthington, former head of biomedical engineering. 71 years old, 40 years with the company. Let go 6 weeks ago. His pension had been worth $3.2 million. "James, it's Alexis Monroe." "Alexis, I heard you were..." "Jesus, is it true? The patents?" "Every word, but I need to know. Are you in?" "After what they did to Margaret and me, we had to sell our house. Alexis. 40 years. And they gave me 2 weeks severance. Yes. I'm in." One by one. I made the calls. Sandra Lopez from Research, William Huang from Development, Rebecca Foster from Clinical Trials. Each had a similar story. Decades of service dismissed as redundancies. Retirements destroyed by optimization metrics. By the time I finished, I had all 14 on board. Michael knocked on the door. "They're back, and they brought reinforcements." The conference room now contained half of Berlane's board of directors, including Charlotte Brennan, the lead independent director I'd always respected. She was the first to speak. "Ms. Monroe, we've discussed your terms. Before we respond, I need you to understand something. What you're asking for, the permanent veto power, it fundamentally changes our corporate structure. No investor will touch us." "That's not my problem, Ms. Brennan." "It will be if the company collapses entirely. Your patents will be worthless if there's no company to commercialize them." I smiled. "Actually, I've had 3 calls from private equity firms this morning, all very interested in acquiring the patents if Berlane can't meet my terms. Turns out, clean IP without corporate baggage is quite valuable." The blood drained from several faces around the table. "However," I continued, "I have new information that might change the equation. I've spoken with the 14 other affected employees. They're prepared to join this action if we file jointly. We don't just cloud the 9 patents, we challenge Berlane's entire handling of pension obligations. The liability could exceed $500 million. Patricia Morse looked like she might vomit. "You're bluffing." Michael slid a new stack of documents across the table. 14 affidavits, signed and notarized. We can file within the hour. Charlotte Brennan stood up. "May I speak with you privately?" "Ms. Monroe?" We stepped into Michael's private office. Charlotte closed the door and, for a moment, just looked at me. "I voted against your termination," she said quietly. "I want you to know that I thought Rourke's optimization plan was short-sighted and cruel. But I was outvoted. And yet you let it happen. Yes, I did. And that's something I'll have to live with." She moved to the window. "What would it take for you to accept a 15-year veto instead of permanent?" "Nothing. The veto stays permanent. Even if I personally guarantee the pension restorations, even if I lead a motion to restructure the entire board." I studied her. Charlotte Brennan had power. Real power. But she'd also stood by while Rourke destroyed lives. The veto stays permanent. But if you're serious about restructuring the board, I have a proposal. One board seat, rotating annually among the crisis period employees. Full voting rights. Full access to company information. Her eyes widened. A board seat? That's unprecedented. So was calling human beings acceptable losses. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'll take it back to them. But Alexis, you've won. Don't overplay your hand." "I'm not playing anymore. Charlotte, I'm collecting a debt." 20 minutes later, they capitulated. Full pension restoration for all 15 employees, totaling $127 million. Public apology ads in 3 major publications. Rourke's immediate resignation with no golden parachute. Permanent veto power over the 9 patents for all affected employees. And 1 rotating board seat. As we drafted the agreement, my phone buzzed with a message from James Worthington. "Just saw the news. Rourke is out. Did we really do this?" I typed back, "We did. And we're not done." Marcus Burlane signed the documents with a shaking hand. "You know what you've done? You've turned us into a corporate democracy. Every major decision about our core technology will need approval from people we fired." "People you shouldn't have fired," I corrected. "People who built the technology your company is worth billions for. People who were never acceptable losses, just undervalued assets." As they filed out, Rourke stopped at the door. His face was twisted with rage. "You think you've won? You've just painted a target on your back. Corporate America has a long memory." "So do I, Mr. Rourke, and unlike you, I keep very good records." The door slammed behind him. Michael poured 2 glasses of exceptional scotch from his private reserve. "You realize every company in America will blacklist you after this," he said. I raised my glass. "I'm counting on it. I just secured a retirement worth $8.5 million, plus a permanent income stream from patent licensing oversight. I don't need corporate America anymore." "And the others?" "They're about to discover what it feels like to have power over the people who discarded them. That's worth more than any pension." The news broke within minutes. Markets reopened. Burlane's stock recovered 15% on news that the patent dispute was resolved. But the real story was in the details. A group of terminated employees had just forced one of Boston's largest corporations to its knees, using a 14-year-old clause everyone had forgotten existed. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's forcing them to live with you forever, watching from inside their own walls, holding a veto over their dreams. The final negotiation was scheduled for 10 a.m. Wednesday at my apartment. I'd insisted on home turf. Let them come to me for once. They arrived in a convoy of black SUVs, looking like a funeral procession for corporate dignity. Marcus Burlane led the delegation, flanked by Charlotte Brennan and Patricia Morse. No Rourke. He'd already been escorted from the building. Behind them came a phalanx of lawyers carrying documents that would reshape Burlane Technologies forever. "Before we sign anything," Marcus said, standing in my living room like a man approaching a guillotine, "I need to know something. That clause in 2006, did you always plan this?" I poured coffee from my mother's silver service, the one luxury I'd kept from better times. "I planned for the possibility that someone, someday, might forget that companies are made of people, not spreadsheets. I never imagined it would take 14 years. I never imagined it would be me." Charlotte Brennan pulled out the documents. "Everything you demanded is here. The pension restorations are already being processed. The apology ads run tomorrow in all 3 publications. She handed me a proof of the Wall Street Journal ad. The headline was everything I'd demanded. Berlane Technologies apologizes for calling loyal employees acceptable losses. The board seat? I asked. Approved. First term goes to Dr. James Worthington, given his seniority. The veto structure has been integrated into our patent licensing framework. Any transaction involving those 9 patents now requires approval from the Patent Oversight Committee, consisting of all 15 affected employees. Patricia Morse couldn't hide her bitterness. You've essentially created a shadow board. 15 people who don't even work for us anymore will control our most valuable assets. 14, I corrected. I won't be participating in the Oversight Committee. Everyone stopped. Marcus looked up sharply. What? I've achieved what I wanted. The others need this more than I do. My vote transfers to them equally. I signed the papers with my mother's fountain pen. But I'm keeping the board seat rotation eligibility. I think I'd enjoy attending a few meetings, just to see how things are run from the inside. The irony wasn't lost on them. They'd have to see me at board meetings, report to me, treat me as an equal after trying to discard me like trash. Patricia's phone buzzed. Her face went pale. Helvix wants an emergency call. They're concerned about the governance changes. Tell them, Charlotte said firmly, that Berlane Technologies just demonstrated the most valuable asset any company can have, the ability to honor its obligations and correct its mistakes. As they prepared to leave, Marcus lingered. You could have destroyed us completely. Why didn't you? Because destruction is easy, Mr. Berlane. Any fool with a match can burn down a building. It takes intelligence to renovate it from the inside. Besides, I smiled. Watching you report to a board that includes people you called acceptable losses, that's so much better than destruction. Patricia was reading her phone, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm. The press? They're calling you the patent Robin Hood. The story's going viral. Other terminated employees from different companies are looking for similar clauses. Good, I said simply. Maybe next time, executives will think twice before optimizing away the people who built their empires. Charlotte Brennan was the last to leave. At the door, she turned back. The board seat. When you do decide to attend a meeting, I think you'll find you have more allies than you expect. Not everyone agreed with Rourke's methods. But everyone profited from them. Yes, she admitted. We did, and that's something we'll have to reckon with. After they left, I stood on my balcony, looking out at the city. My phone was buzzing constantly. Journalists, other terminated employees, even a few corporate headhunters who apparently didn't get the memo that I was now unemployable and didn't care. James Worthington called. Alexis, the wire transfer just hit my account. Full pension restoration plus interest. Margaret cried, we can keep the house. It was never their money to take. James? The others want to have dinner Friday, a celebration, but also strategy. We have real power now. We need to decide how to use it. Carefully, I advised. They'll be watching for any excuse to paint us as vindictive or irrational. We need to be surgical. Approve what deserves approval. Block what deserves blocking. And always, always document everything. That evening, the news coverage exploded. CNN ran a segment called The Clause That Ate Wall Street. The Financial Times published an op-ed warning about the dangers of hidden legal time bombs in corporate documents. Bloomberg calculated that if similar clauses existed in other Fortune 500 companies, the potential liability could exceed $1 trillion. But the best moment came at 11:47 p.m. A text from an unknown number that I recognized as Damian Rourke's personal cell. You've destroyed my career. No one will hire me after this. I typed back, I believe the term you're looking for is acceptable loss. You should be familiar with it. I blocked the number and poured myself a glass of wine. Tomorrow, the apology ads would run. The business world would wake up to see one of its own forced to publicly admit they were wrong. and 15 people who'd been discarded would begin their new roles as permanent guardians of billions in intellectual property. They'd thought they were eagles, soaring above consequences. They'd forgotten that even eagles can be brought down by a patient hunter who knows exactly where to aim. Thursday morning, the apology ads ran exactly as demanded. The Wall Street Journal's edition sold out by 9 a.m. Someone had framed the ad and sent it to my apartment with a note. From all of us who've been called acceptable losses, thank you. At 11:57 a.m., 3 minutes before the final signing deadline, they arrived at Michael's office for the last time. The merger with Helvix hung by a thread. They needed our signatures on the patent clearance documents by noon or lose everything. Marcus Berlane looked like he'd aged a decade in 3 days. The clearance documents are ready. All 15 members of the Patent Oversight Committee need to sign. I'd gathered everyone in Michael's conference room, 14 people whose combined service to Berlane totaled over 400 years. We sat around the table like a jury about to deliver a verdict. Before we sign, I said, standing, "There's one more thing." Patricia Morse exploded. "Are you fucking kidding me? We met every demand." "Relax, Patricia. I'm not asking for anything more. I'm giving you something." I pulled out a single sheet of paper. An amendment to our oversight structure. We'll pre-approve any patent usage that maintains or creates jobs for employees over 50. We'll fast-track any licensing that funds pension obligations. And we'll never, ever block innovation that serves genuine medical advancement. Charlotte Brennan read it carefully. "You're helping us?" "We're helping the employees you haven't fired yet. The ones looking over their shoulders, wondering if they're next. They'll know now that someone is watching. Someone with power." Marcus took the amendment with trembling hands. "Why?" "Because the best revenge isn't destruction, Mr. Berlane. It's transformation. You'll rebuild Berlane, but you'll do it knowing we're always here. Every board meeting, every patent decision, every time you look at those 9 patents generating billions in revenue, you'll remember that they're protected by the people you threw away." We signed the clearance documents at 11:59 a.m. The Helvix merger was saved, Berlane's stock soared, and 15 acceptable losses became the most powerful oversight committee in corporate America. As they prepared to leave, Marcus stopped at the door one last time. "That clause you wrote in 2006, there's something else in it, isn't there? Something you haven't triggered yet?" I smiled. "Maybe. Maybe not. Maybe. But you'll never know for sure, will you? Every decision you make from now on, you'll wonder, is this the one that activates another clause? That uncertainty, Mr. Berlane, is my real gift to you." His face went pale. He left without another word. That afternoon, the Patent Oversight Committee held its first official meeting. We established our charter, our voting procedures, and our first act, creating a fund for employees approaching retirement, protecting them from future optimizations. Dr. Worthington raised a toast with coffee in paper cups. To Alexis Monroe, who remembered what they forgot, that contracts work both ways, and patience is the deadliest weapon in business. 3 months later, I attended my first Berlane board meeting as the rotating employee representative. Walking into that boardroom where I'd once been told I was an acceptable loss, now sitting as an equal among those who'd discarded me, that was the moment I knew I'd won completely. Damian Rourke never found another executive position. His optimization strategies had become toxic. No company would touch him. Last I heard, he was teaching business ethics at a community college in Maine. The irony was delicious. The 9 patents went on to generate over $12 billion in licensing revenue over the next 5 years. Every dollar flowed through our committee. We approved innovations, blocked exploitations, and always protected the employees who made it all possible. But the real victory came in the ripples across corporate America. HR departments scrambled to review old agreements. Employment lawyers became the highest-paid consultants in business. And acceptable loss became a phrase no executive dared utter. They'd thought they were predators in a jungle where only the ruthless survived. They'd forgotten that evolution favors not the strongest, but the most adaptable. And sometimes, the most dangerous predator is the one that knows how to use the jungle's own rules against it. I kept the termination letter Rourke had given me, framed above my desk next to the apology ad. 2 documents, 3 days apart. That told the complete story of how a handful of discarded employees brought a billion-dollar company to its knees with nothing but patience, paperwork, and the fatal corporate assumption that contracts only protect those in power. They called me an acceptable loss. I showed them what loss really meant. And I did it all with their own signature on the weapon that destroyed them. The greatest revenge isn't served cold. It's served with compound interest, calculated over 14 years, and delivered with a smile that says, "You should have read the fine print." Some might call it vindictive. I call it justice, optimized for maximum impact. After all, I learned from the best. Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate revenge. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of justice served cold, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Alexis's position? Have you ever witnessed corporate karma in action? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that notification bell for more stories of brilliant revenge.